Hey and welcome to the Creative Odyssey podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth by me, Emil Ruth. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. So I'm here with Michael Osburn, and as I always do, I will let you have the chance to introduce yourself in your own words. So who are you, Michael?
I think probably the most important thing about me is I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I love working outside in construction and helping people solve problems. Spend a lot of time trying to be a good example for my kids, working out, eating well, doing things that I want them to do when they get older. And so I think a lot about that, reading books. And so I think that's it in a nutshell. I like I really like doing hard things. I go to hard places. I've worked in some hard places around the world. I've done some crazy things from a work and fitness standpoint. So I think that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. So I kind of discovered you via posting your Instagram carousels, and I've wondered how did you get from like construction work, which is more or less a pretty concise thing, to kind of building an online catalog and reels and being resolving about books and mental models and stuff like that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't realize it probably at the time, but I come from, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and other relatives are, I think, pretty adventurous and creative types. My great-grandfather worked for the King of Greece and immigrated to the U.S. in like 1904. Just got on a boat, came over to New York, met up with his uncle, started washing dishes, cleaning shoes. Next thing you know, he's, working on a restaurant and had a bunch of businesses. And same thing with my grandfather. He was really into chemical engineering in the 1940s, but didn't want to be part of, the engineering crowd, and ended up going to work with his dad in the restaurant business and became more of an entrepreneur. And so for me, I really like art. I love history. Engineering was something I did because math and science were easy, but I love drawing. I grew up like doing artwork and stuff ever since I was a kid. And so just the ability to create, I mean, honestly, anything. Like I would, create workout programs for my kids. I would draw pictures. I think the stuff online that you've seen, is sort of what, I mean, honestly, it's for me more than anybody, right? Like it's just reminders to myself on how to be a good dad, how to be a good example. And there's a way to present that where it's, I think, interesting to people and catches their attention. And so that's probably what kind of maybe caught your attention.
Yeah, I've seen you kind of portraying topics like courage or wisdom or timelessness or old books. And are you trying to kind of preserving these wisdoms you've gathered alongside your life, or how do you find your topics? So what makes you think, that should be a carousel post?
Yeah, I think, it's those things that still relate today that were relevant 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. I mean, I think it was a hardcore history guy, Dan Carlin, was talking about Alexander the Great and, virtue and vice. And at what point does a quality become a virtue versus does it become a vice? And so, courage, too much courage, you become reckless, right? So then it's a vice. Not enough courage, you're kind of a coward, and you need to find that balance. And so I think there's ways to do that even in our modern age and in our lives today that I think, the further we forget, or the sooner we forget that, I think the more trouble we get in. And so like, I like stories throughout history. And like, honestly, you can look at stories around today and find people that are embracing those kind of qualities that still matter.
I really like also really like the art style and the kind of mixture you're balancing, like bold typefaces and really this classical realism and sometimes impressionist art styles. How did you find your style? Did you try out different kind of combinations, or what was the process like?
Yeah, I think it's you sort of take what others have done and make it your own, right? I think there's a great author. I don't know if you've ever read any Ryan Holiday stuff, but watching how he kind of worked for Robert Greene and adopted similar things to Robert Greene's style, but then over the course of a decade or two, he's kind of made it his own, right? And so
Yeah.
I love reading Robert Greene. I love reading Benjamin Franklin. I love reading Ryan Holiday. I like all these things, Epictetus, like whole books. And you read enough of it, you sort of embody what you enjoy. And I mean, I love impressionist art. I love classical art. I'm not really big into contemporary art. Like, again, I love history and kind of the
Mm.
ancients and stuff like that. So, I've just kind of taken a little bit of everything that I enjoy and tried to mold it into who I am.
So this is more like an intuitive way in finding your way of expression in your art style and the topics. So you don't really thought about what kind of topics am I portraying, or what kind of topics should my personal brand be like. It just reflects the way your internal curiosity is, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think, you hear about entrepreneurs and business people that have been successful. They talk about scratching their own itch, right? Like they kind of build something that they or their friends, would want or use. And so I think you kind of, you can get lost creating things for other people, right? I
Mm.
think no matter what you're doing, it's going to be hard. And so if you don't enjoy it, you'll quit. And so for me, finding something I enjoy that, even though it looks hard, it doesn't feel like work, right? I love getting up early. I love reading. I love writing. I mean, if I had no day job, those are things I would do anyway. And a lot of what I write and kind of create is, it's more sort of lessons for myself that I think would be applicable to my kids both now and in their future. And so I think about that a lot. And yeah, it's not so much like what do people want or what is my brand. It's like, what am I interested in? Like, who do I want to be? Like, I think it's, I can't remember the Epictetus quote, but like, basically he adds like a thing where, you decide who you want to be and like take those actions, right? Like you should become
Yeah.
that person by making a decision and moving in that direction.
Yeah, I recently had like the spark of thought that, uh, which I actually tweeted. Or do you say posted nowadays? When now it's X. I posted on X that one's life's philosophy is determined by action, not by the way of thinking. So this kind of applies to what you have been saying right now. So you kind of celebrating the way you act, and you want to push this wisdom, or give this kind of wisdom back to your kids, and for them to embody this. I think it's pretty great that you've done this, and I honestly do really like the way the topics are building up on another, whereas like courage, discipline, these virtues, which are based in historical and philosophical topics like stoicism, and as you said, Ryan Holiday. So what kind of books can you recommend for me or for the listener to read when it comes to stuff like this?
I think starting with the classics, the anything that's old, right? Like that's kind of stood the test of time and gone through multiple generations. I think it like the new stuff, like there's new things I think that are interesting, but I mean I like the old stuff, right? Like I read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography a bunch. There's lots of interesting stories there, and I think when he was a teenager he escaped Boston or to flee to Philadelphia, where he ended up living most of his life. But he was like a kid with no money in his pocket, and he's like on a ferry boat and stuff like that. Like I don't know, many 10 or 12-year-olds that could make a 600-mile trip on their own these days, right? So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I like stuff that's old and sort of stood the test of time. Honestly, like talked about mental models, like Shane Parrish is a great writer. Farnham Street, like on his blog, and I really enjoy stuff like Warren Buffett writes and things that don't apply to necessarily construction. Ryan Holiday, Robert Greene, those are great authors that I enjoy. Stephen Pressfield, I know he writes a lot of fiction, but like he writes about topics that, again, I think even though they're in a fictional story are still relevant. Tim Ferriss is a great guy that has lots of wisdom that he's kind of collected from smart people around him. So, just stuff like that, that I enjoy reading.
Yeah, thank you for the recommendations. It's not that my want to read list isn't long enough, but still, when I first kind of discovered your profile on Instagram, your account, I was wondering how this kind of branding worked out for you. I've asked you before that these are the things that reflect your personality, but you're still pushing your own business, the Aristos Global, and it's a construction business, and you still are not framing your own personal brand. So being I'm Michael Osburn, and this is just me and my personal thing, but you're still kind of representing Aristos. Was this an obvious choice, or do you saw the opportunity for the exposure you might gain and might build trust and for your company?
I think it's I tell my kids this a lot. It's like if you want people to be interesting in you, you should be interesting, right? Like I think there is again, we talked about virtue and vice. Like there's a balance to sort of promoting what you're doing versus kind of looking for vanity metrics and attention, right? I think, I want people to know what I've done. I want people to know that I can help them with stuff. I want people to know I've done hard things, but, I think you do it in a way that I think has some restraint, but also still has substance behind it, right? Like, when people ask for work, like, oh, this is hard. Like, how can you do this? Like, I've worked in very hard places. I've stayed up all night working. I've run a race for, on my own for 24 hours. I've done very hard things, not just in my work life. And so I think it shows that I'm capable of solving these problems. And so I think, there's a lot of emphasis on personal branding and things like that. I think your brand is not what you say it is, it's what you do. Like you talked about earlier, it's what people think of you when they hear your name. It's what people see in terms of results you produce. And so you can write and do all the things you want online, but what do people think about when they hear your name? What do they say about you when you're not around? What do you do to produce outcomes for them? And so I think that's probably more important than anything.
That's a great insight. And I often come across this when I'm trying to kind of produce content, and doing a podcast and writing and dabbling with blog posts and simultaneously writing a book. Right now, it feels a bit like imposterous, if this is a word. I'm not sure. I feel
imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah, this imposter syndrome. Where I'm not really sure if this is what I'm representing, but I still kind of balance it out, and I don't know where I got this idea from. but someone who's just writing and never took action is far less trustable, like far less trustworthy. The example of maybe Nassim Taleb, who actually worked in the field to then talk about this kind of stuff on probability and risk, and he lived through this, and you might then trust him more in his stories, rather than just reading someone making theoretical assumptions of something. And I'm kind of in between, proving that I'm actually doing the stuff that I'm writing and not just writing them. And this kind of makes a non-fiction work then fictional if you never do the stuff you're actually trying to share with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have some sort of belief, and look, like not everybody has experience when they do the things they want to do, right? You have to kind of be crazy enough to do it anyway when people tell you you can't. And so I think, again, it goes back to like just kind of the balance. But I think it all kind of centers around action, right? Like what actions are you taking? I think I for a long time didn't write enough publicly because I was sort of afraid of how it would be perceived in relation to like the work and the types of clients we wanted to achieve. And probably the older I got, the more gray hair I got. I was like, you know what? I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter what people think as long as I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm kind of putting out, something of quality that I'm proud to like write. Whether one person likes it or hates it, it's irrelevant. I'm going to write it anyway. And I hope it helps people. But at the end of the day, creating something that is interesting is, it's fulfilling in itself. And so I think that's, how you got to kind of focus.
Let me kind of get back to the idea of action. So action solves everything.
I think so. I mean, I think if you're stuck, like, if you're in a bad place and kind of stuck in the mental space of your mind, like you need to go move your body, right? Like if you can't figure out how to, get a project started, like you got to just start moving and figure out how to move in which direction and how far, right? Like it requires, all the brainstorming and research in the world won't help you write. Like you have to actually write, and write and edit, write and edit, write and edit. Like the more you do it, the better you get.
Yeah, I just wondered. Obviously, it's the easiest way for me to relate to this in talking about my own experience. Countless times when I was writing, I thought, either way, I'm so on the one hand, I'm just doing it, and I don't want to wait until I feel ready to kind of publish it. And on the other hand, I feel like I need to get better at what I'm doing. And obviously, tools like ChatGPT come in handy, but still discourage me that I could write better technically, because obviously my grammar wouldn't be the best. I'm not like a skilled writer, if you can kind of categorize that. I don't think that I can write particularly well, and I edit more than I write. So that's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, but like if you read about, great authors both now and throughout history, like, I mean, going back to, Benjamin Franklin, right? Like he wrote a basically a newsletter in a newspaper under, I think, like the Silas Do-Good or Silas Too-Good, like kind of pseudonym, like it was not under Benjamin Franklin, but he wrote that for like over 20 years, and like before anybody knew it was him. And so like he did something for a very long time, and if you think about how hard it was to acquire pen and paper and write, whether under candlelight or whatever, like, the guy put out a lot of material, and he was doing that, several hundred years ago when it was very difficult to do. And so, like, there's no excuse for us not to, type out 1,000 words here or there on a laptop or a computer. It should be pretty easy,
It is pretty easy. It's never been easier. I just kind of noticed that it's at least for me, sometimes it's hard to trust my abilities and to not double check the cohesion and every kind of structure in a sentence because of tools like ChatGPT and or Claude or whatever the large language models, and just be okay. I'm okay with the kind of output I'm producing, and I see the barrier is. I think a few years ago it was the best time when blogs were new, when you were one of the few who can run like a successful blog. Or I think it's might be like the Tim Ferriss era of writing. He had like a broad field he can just write. It was refreshing. It is kind of harder, and if you see it in like business terms, the market is more saturated with writing, and you can't even separate genuine text from generated text. And I still kind of think that I am trying to do my best, and nonetheless I want to have it finished for my legacy more than anything else, that I can look that I finally finished and published something, whether it's a book or whatever kind of creative project. So you're working in your own company, right? Aristos is your company, right?
Correct.
So you are kind of working in and for your own company, and on the side you are building your creative legacy. How important do you think is building something? I mean, obviously you're in construction, you build in like literal terms, but I mean like alongside your work, where you just kind of produce something for someone else normally, to build something your own that you can have like in your hands or look upon in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the stories we see and hear from other people throughout history, and like I think about my own family history that I only know so much of my family, and so I think by being able to write kind of letters to my kids or things that for their kids or their kids, like creating kind of our own little family legacy and history of what lessons were learned the hard way, the easy way, over the course of my life that could be applicable in 50 or 100 years to them. And so I think to me that's important, and it definitely helps focus, what you do and what you don't do, what you say and what you don't say, and things like that.
It's a pretty cool way to see this like this. And I can hear that you're a proud dad, and that makes me kind of emotional, because I'm really proud of my dad too, because of the work he does, and how much he contributes to his field, and like in Scrum and agile product development stuff. And I think it's pretty cool, even though there's a lot of time sometimes consuming, or was time consuming at times. But now being 25, I see this as kind of legacy building, and you can pass some knowledge, not the entire thing when you're in the field and have specific knowledge to work there. I got certified in some of these certifications in Scrum, or but these don't really matter. The years and years in a specific field matter, and I think you will agree that if someone just stepped out and have like a certificate of being great at construction or whatever, it doesn't matter. You have the years of experience, and it kind of goes along with your opinion, I think, and that action matters more, and accumulated action is actually the best kind of knowledge you can have.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think if it wasn't construction, if I was cutting grass or flipping burgers, like I would take the same approach, right? Like I think, there's kind of the fundamentals of how you work hard and solve problems and help people, take care of yourself, take care of your family. I mean, I think it it's simple, not easy, is what you may hear the phrase occasionally, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's still fun no matter what.
I think this is a really adaptive way. So no matter the profession, you will still stand up straight for your values and your virtues and the ethics or the work ethic you're trying to pursue, and have the ability to stand up and go your way with a straight posture and being proud of what you're doing, no matter what. How important do you think adaptability is, especially nowadays with like fast technology changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think adaptability is very important. I mean, honestly, like where I am today, I'm in my early 40s. Like, I wish I knew half the things I did when I was 22. I think like probably something I think about now, and I look more to guys that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s of like what they're doing, and then also talking to guys that are in their 20s and 30s about what they should be thinking about and doing. And so I think there's something to be said by kind of working and being around people of different ages. I think with all the technology, ChatGPT, and all this stuff, like regardless of what the computers are doing, you can tell when there's real substance behind whatever was generated, right? Like no matter what is being portrayed online, like people live offline, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
live out in the real world, and so it's interesting to see how people are treated on the internet and things like that versus like a lot of the things people would say on the internet they wouldn't say to your face because like it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
I think there's being more focused and more in tune to what's going on around you. It will help with that adaptability. I mean, like talk about adaptable. Like not many people know this. When COVID started in 2020, I was on a plane within a month of like the government kind of shutting everything down, and I probably did 150 flights in the first 12 months. I was being adaptable. I was going out doing things that people didn't want to do. It wasn't, easy. Like it may have been scary at times, but like I was going to do it because I knew it was something hard that would hopefully give me an advantage later. And it did. We picked up a lot of work and helped a lot of people, but learned a lot of things that were there was reporting in the headlines that was different than what I was seeing in all the different places I was going, right? Because I was there. I was physically
Mm.
on the ground versus what all the kind of clickbait things going around the internet of what people were saying. And so like I really I think there's a very important aspect to like kind of living life in the real world and like going out, talking to people, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, learning how to deal with challenges and things like that.
Yeah, that really makes me think about kind of how I want to stand up with my work when I kind of both think that having an like online personality and having some kind of content out there, and most or not entirely most, but many of the most interesting conversations I had are done with essentially strangers I have never met before, and probably would have never met in the real world. Or if I have ever met them, I wouldn't have the conversation with them. So I'm really grateful for what is there, and this is why I chose to use this platform, because I cannot change who I am when I'm here sitting and kind of real life talking to you, and you see my reaction and stumbling and stuttering, kind of to answer your questions or to formulate the questions I want to ask you. And on the other hand, I agree with you that the real world where we're living in is more important, because this is always given. So if the internet shuts down, you're still there and need to do stuff, and you can still be helpful. And for me, it's kind of hard to balance both, because sometimes think my work in writing and my business growing or my content is more important than what I would do here, especially when there's not a lot of jobs in my subject matter in my hometown. So I might be moving in a few years. But I do experience this problem solving thing, which feels a lot different in the real world than it does online.
Yeah, and I think about this. I had sorry, you're my second podcast, not my first. I had my first podcast a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and as I listened to it and like kind of answered their questions, I was thinking, I thought a lot about, am I being congruent, right? Like, in what I'm saying, is that what I believe? Is that what I do? And so, like, I think, that kind of, that has to be kind of the center of everything that in the actions you take. But to your point, I mean, the internet is a wild place and it's a great thing. Like, I can reach people that I normally wouldn't talk to or, connect with. And I think I've met a lot of people online that have then become like in-person connections that later
Yep.
that like, I think is, I never would have known they existed, and there's definitely a certain perspective that you can get through connecting with people, I'd say genuinely on the internet that then, can become, potentially, offline or real world connections as well. And so, I joke a lot of friends and colleagues for work, like, oh, call Michael. Like, he probably could help figure it out. Like, I kind of say, like, I got a guy. Like, if you need something, like, I probably got a guy. Like, I had somebody that was looking for work, and one country, I was like, oh, I know somebody that owns an art studio there. Let me see if they know something. And like just started shooting a couple of text messages around WhatsApp, and sure enough, after 20 minutes, like, I found the guy. And
Yeah.
so I think that like technology can be a very useful tool, but just like we talked about earlier, like virtue and vice, right? Like,
Yep.
when does it become a good thing? When does it become too much and become a vice, right?
Definitely. And funnily enough, I've had a conversation with Naufal Filali. Maybe you've known him or seen some of his videos or posts on Instagram. And another guy I've met in Spain through kind of a hackathon kind of situation, who was then, where was he from? Not from, I'm not sure. He's somewhere from Africa. Mauritania it was. Sorry for losing that. He was Mauritanian, and I didn't know that he speaks French. And Naufal is from Morocco and also speaks French. And now the guy moved to Paris to study there, and I kind of arranged these two guys to kind of met up for kind of chat, and somehow this worked out, and it was so weird because I've never seen Naufal before in real life, but the other person, and now they've met up. So I've know a guy, and I it's not that I have any advantage of them for them meeting up. I don't have anything. There's no advantage for me, but kind of made me happy that I kind of connected seemingly like-minded people, and this kind of make me a bit proud of my pursuit in reaching out to people online. So I kind of understand where you uh, it's still better if you know a guy who actually productively can help someone, but meeting up with someone who might be a good conversational partner might be a great thing too. So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an instinct we all have that can be dulled by too much, working online in a vacuum, right? I think you have to sort of hone that instinct, both online and offline, and it's through that kind of, I think, creative process of discovering like what you're about, right? And what you do, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, what you're good at, what you want to learn. I think
yeah,
it's all just kind of part of a bigger process.
definitely. One thing I notice in being when I kind of feel like I'm online too much is when I'm kind of echo chambering my ideas and things I want to learn. And then I realize that people see things sometimes vastly different, and I'm okay with disagreeing on something. And on the internet, to not make this to make this too big of a topic too much, some people might heavily disagree on political statements, but in real life they are going together pretty well. They have no problems working with each other, but you would never guessed it based on their kind of exaggerated views on certain topics. And I always think that I would disagree with someone online or on the internet, and then all of a sudden in person they are just a complex person and they're just human and they see things with a lot more nuance than they would portray. So this is
Yeah, I
also kind
mean,
of
you said you said two of the words I was thinking about: complex and nuance, right? Like I
yeah
think it is. It's kind of a lost art these days, right? Like it has to be one thing or the other. Everybody's on such an extreme, no matter what, right? Like, in construction, we see it where like, it's the architect's fault or the contractor's fault. It can't be both. Like it most always is both, right? Or like,
yeah
the owner can be responsible for a lot of the problems the architect and contractor are creating, right? Because the owner is giving them both direction. And so
yeah
I think there's like a certain level of complexity and nuance that a lot of people forget. And you maybe say things that you can't walk back, right? Like it's a lot easier to just kind of be a little more moderate and loose in your opinion than such an extreme that you can't come back from.
yeah definitely. I 100% agree with you, and I can not understand someone being so heavily opinionated about something. um like, how can you be so sure that your opinion is the right, and not not even my strongest belief is like 100% where I stand? No chance, no, I'm backing from this ever. I cannot understand how can someone be like so sure about something and not change their mind at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I want to say it was Benjamin Franklin, like in his autobiography, or one thing he wrote where he talks about like rarely using the words always and never, right? Like he was never like I think you try to, and like I was never always good at this. Like I did have strong opinions and I did think I was right a lot, especially when I was younger.
Yeah,
I think the older I get, the more I realize how difficult I probably was when I was younger. And so I think it's tough, right? Like you want to be right, but at the same time, like there could be new information where you're totally wrong, and you need to be okay with that. And like I think the older I get, the more comfortable I am with that. I mean, I may not be right, I may not be popular. Like that's okay. I'm just gonna kind of be me and move on.
yeah. It's always a thing, as everything in life is a balance thing, where you can, I mean, someone who can never form an opinion is not something you can hold off of anything either. So you need to be sure, at least to a certain degree, to be a bit decisive. And I can only guess from my outside perspective that decisiveness is definitely a virtue in construction work. I don't think you're going back and forth and considering here and being unsure would necessarily make you a good guy at your business. So that's another thing. So being
Yeah, I mean, I think
decisive.
there's like two things you kind of made me think of. Like you talked about theory and practice earlier. I think there's a lot of theory that surrounds construction and development in real estate, and not a lot of people that have those theories have been on a construction site, right? Like
Yeah.
they've never really left the office, and so I think that is a major instinct that is lost when you don't get out of the office. I think decisiveness, one of the things we talk about a lot with our clients and certain owner groups is we say sometimes you're going to be your own worst enemy. You're going to go slow when you need to go fast. You're going to go fast when you need to go slow. Like they don't know when to be decisive or how to be decisive. And so, when they go slow, but they should go fast, like that has kind of a ripple effect down the road where
Yep.
it makes things more difficult. And then when they go fast, when they should go slow, they go fast in the wrong direction. And all of a sudden they have to kind of regroup and realign into the right direction. And so I think there's, again, like we talked about, as nuance and balance, right? Like those are things that have been true for ages and ages, right? And so I think that's something that can easily get lost even in a field like construction.
This makes me kind of, definitely, I agree. But this makes me kind of curious at what kind of decision you have to make slowly in construction, and in which cases you might want to be faster.
I think it's there's certain things in construction, that have a finite time window, right? And there's others that you need to understand, like how much time you have to make that decision. Are there other kind of codependencies on that decision, right? Like I think the more people that are waiting for an answer, probably like the faster your answer needs to be, because there's a lot of other people downstream of you that need to take subsequent actions, right? And so, I think it's hard to give a specific example that, everybody would probably understand, but a lot of owners will kind of kick an idea to death to the point where like it should have been a quick decision. It's a small dollar amount, a small change in the overall scheme of the project. Hey, make a decision and move on. Like we need to save our brain power for a bigger decision that we don't even know is coming, right? Like I think being able to anticipate that there may be more difficult challenges in the future that we have to answer. For example, I can't get power to my building in time to allow my drywall and my painting and all my finishes to kind of start. And so I think it just depends on the context, but I definitely think the more people that are waiting for an answer, probably the more important that decision is. And I think there's kind of a, how involved is that answer related to your overall scope or your overall price or price change? I think that can kind of give you some guardrails to think about.
Yeah, usually, funnily, the decisions that matter the least are thought about the most. I don't know why that is, if it's perfectionism or something else. But definitely your the way of seeing that how many people are affected by your decision or the time of your decision is definitely a good mental model to consider. But most people don't really think about that. Instead of just weighing their options they have in hand, and don't really think about the consequences and the other people affected by a decision.
Yeah. I mean, like you have these meetings in construction where if you count the number of people in the meeting and how long the meeting goes, and they're talking about a $2,000 issue and you spent $10,000 in salaries to decide that $2,000 issue, and you waste an hour and a half of everybody's time, like that's crazy to me that still happens. Yep. It's like, so yeah, it's kind of wild, and you just, deal with it and do the best you can.
It's like typical human inefficiency, and this is also sometimes these meetings. I don't know how meetings in construction are like, but mostly meetings dragging time are people arguing or having a conversation about small details, just to kind of say their opinion out loud, just to have a voice. They need to kind of bring something into the conversation, whether it matters in a grand scheme or not. If you're planning some kind of event, there is no reason to have a meeting and speak through all of the details, like how many bottles of wine do you need exactly, and what kinds of, and where should it come from, and what should be the supply, and that's no place to kind of have this detail level in a meeting where we just kind of need the group creativity and not the specific planning for.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier. He talks a lot about like the lead domino, right? Like, what is the one decision that'll make all my subsequent other decisions easier? And so I think about that a lot. A lot of people don't ask like, what is the most important thing I should be working on, right? Like it's something I try to teach my kids. Like, you're not taught how to prioritize in school.
Yeah.
You're just taught to do whatever you're being told to do, and so like I think that's a lost art. And I mean, these are all kind of part art, part science, right? Like it's not, there's no like strict form and framework. I mean, even if you're in technology and design, like there's a creativity to writing code, right? There's a creativity to like how you build a technology that it's not science. It's not, programming. It is like, it is an art. And like, the ones that get it probably do better, right?
Yeah, I deal a lot with like, so in my other kind of personality, and it's definitely hard circling back to the topic of having like an online brand and being in the real world. So in the real world, so to speak, I'm studying like entrepreneurship, a kind of entrepreneurship where you are actually working in projects that are allowed to make profits, and not something simulating a business cases, but actually working with clients. And this is pretty unique, for it's the only place in Germany where you can study it, and it's actually in my hometown, which is kind of a nice coincidence as well. And still in this, I kind of wandered over years, where I'm more or less in the ending stages. What kind of project do I want to work on? And there was a lot of projects where I just got into for just participating. So I'm in some kind of project, whether it was social media or hosting the kitchen with kind of snacks and stuff like that, and drinks, and being responsible for tidying the dishwasher or something like that. I was just participating for no internal reason. And then later I realized I want to work with the knowledge I had, and I'm more of a ideas guy than a concise product guy or specific service guy. I want to be creative and work with people, so I got into working with teams and team development, and not with like strict schematic and formulated seminars and how to do this and that. And now you have a great team, but like pinpointed and tailored to their needs. So dealing with inefficiency and trust and stuff like that is currently my main topic in the real world. So that's where my current work is based in. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I notice it's kind of dragging. We are developing workshops, and these take a lot of time, like loads and loads of time, and the for like preparation, understanding what the problems are, and what might seem to not be a huge deal, like having a meeting that takes too much time, can be a problem in the long run. And as you said, not is it nice to have like a better team and everyone feels heard, and the psychological safety, which is important still. But as you mentioned before, it's wasting resources, it's wasting money if people are inefficiently just arguing over little details that don't even need to be solved in the first place sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think depending on your role in the organization, like people can show up to the meeting over prepared and help make sure the meeting for their part of the meeting is better. Not everyone gets to control whether they get to show up to the meeting or not, but I
Yeah.
think it's trying to find those small actions you can take that help kind of move things forward.
Yeah, definitely. And from the other point, definitely, and I've never learned to prioritize anything. So my time schedule is usually not really great, but to have this kind of via negative view on how to do what I need to do and prioritize is that I just see what I don't need to do, and I cut back on almost all of the things that I don't really stand behind, or I'm just doing out of habit, or I don't think what is the most important thing. I just cut back the things that are obviously unimportant. That has been working a lot easier on my side.
Good.
Is there any kind of way that any kind of tip you have for prioritizing, or as exactly how to structure your day-to-day life? And you do a lot of hard work, as you said, and how can you push yourself and be ambitious but still kind of have a balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking of prioritizing, I probably have a few more minutes. I think there's a couple things. One, I wish I knew earlier was like kind of think in decades, act in days. So like think in 10 years, like where do I want to be? But like what should I be doing day to day to get there? Right. Like I didn't have that kind of outlook when I was younger.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I did. I do now, but I think in terms of like those daily actions, I sort of live and die by the calendar. I look at my calendar at night, kind of plan my next day, decide are the things that are on there important or not. If they're not, take them off, right? Create some space. The more, the older you get, the more kind of responsibilities and complexities that come with your kind of work and home life. And so I'm big on lists, but like, I think for me, like when I plan my days, like I'm thinking about the 1, 2, 3 things that if I do them, it feels like a win. I used to be a big lists guy, but I'd make these lists of 20 things.
Yeah.
And I'd check off all the small things because I felt good checking off things on the list, but it was like things that didn't matter. They were not very good. And like sometimes I'd write something down that I'd already did just so I could mark it off. And like I think if you have to like kind of force yourself to really spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes to think, are these things important? Should I be doing them? Do they matter? Are they going to have an impact? And like, these are the 3 big things I'm going to do tomorrow. Everything else is like, I'll take it the way, whatever comes. And so I think that is a hard skill that only gets better with practice, right? Like it's a skill. You have to practice it. If you're not doing it daily, you won't get better at it. And so, and for people that have bosses or work in larger organizations, you ask your boss like, hey, this is what I think is most important. These are the things I'm going to work on. Like, do you agree? Like, what do you think about this? Should I change this? That's again something I wasn't really taught to do when I was younger. I probably should have been doing when I had bosses. And so I think those are kind of some frameworks that I think help focus and prioritize. I kind of it's the discipline to do those things that's hard, right? I think I've said a bunch like the soft skills are the hard skills. Like your technical knowledge like doesn't matter. Like we talked about earlier, ChatGPT could probably technically do it, but like the ability to reorganize your priorities, the ability to ask people for help, the ability to ask people like, should I even be working on this? Like no computer's going to do that for you, right?
Exactly. If you have no idea what you do, the technical skill does not matter. Thank you for the input. And I think this is a great point to kind of wrap it up and end this episode. I'm super thankful for taking the time. And I think it was a very valuable conversation. And hopefully we'll circle back sometime to maybe have a part 2. But until then, I will say bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm really grateful for you having me on, and good luck with the studies and everything else. And let me know if I can do anything to help. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Bill.
If you've enjoyed listening to my podcast, you can show support by following me and hit the bell to never miss out on my latest content. I'd appreciate a positive review too. You can find more of my content on www.emilruth.com. Thanks and bye for now.